In our Parsha, in our weekly reading, we learn about the amount of man that the Jewish people gathered. It was Omer, Lekulgolet, Omer for each head, literally. And in the end of the Parsha, it says that Omer is 1/10 of Eifa. So we learn two biblical measures here, Eifa and Omer. And our sages estimated this to be 43 1/5 of a volume of an egg. And in fact, the amount of dough from which challah is taken is the same amount. Meaning, if a person wants to bake a little cake or a little bit of bread, usually women rarely bake bread today. Usually we buy ready-made bread. Although some women specifically for Shabbat bake their own chalot. Now, we call it challah. The entire Shabbos bread is called challah. And in fact, that's closer to the biblical meaning. It's an interesting kind of comeback that happened in terms of the meaning of the word challah. In biblical Hebrew, chalot, in fact, are the actual breads. And then later, the rabbis used to call challah the part of the bread that we give to the Kohen. This is going to be, of course, in Parshat Beshalach in Sefer Bamidbar. In the fourth book of Moshe, there's going to be a commandment given that when we come to the land of Israel, biblically it only applies in the land of Israel, but rabbinically it applies in other places too. So when we come to the land of Israel, the Torah tells us when we'll be eating bread, the dough, we should take away trumah, a little amount, a lifted offering. The trumah is a general term from the word leharim, to bring something up, to uplift something. So this trumah is given to a Kohen. So biblically the word is trumah is used just like the part of the crop that's given to the Kohen originally. When the person, let's say, gathers wheat or other grains, he has to give some part to a Kohen. But then later, when the dough is made, another part is given to the Kohen. Both are called trumah biblically. But the rabbi started calling it challah. That's why there are different nusachayot, different versions of what blessing to make when challah is taken, is separated. Should we mention about challah or should we mention about trumah? Trumah is the biblical word for it, and challah is the rabbinical term for it. I think I saw in some Sephardic books, maybe Ben Ish Chai, that they say both, the word trumah and the word challah. But at any rate, we kind of came back because now we call the bread that's eaten on Shabbat chalas, in Ashkenazi pronunciation, chalas. So this is the comeback to the biblical meaning of the term, not the part that's separated, but the actual bread itself. Maybe because the women specifically bake it in order to take off challah, because otherwise it's a lot cheaper and simpler to buy ready-made bread. But our women love this mitzvah so much, they want to fulfill it once in a while. So some do it for every Shabbat, some do it once. A lot of people do it right after Pesach, the Shabbat after Pesach, the first chametz, and that's when on Friday or on Thursday the women bake and separate challah. So whatever the case may be, the amount of dough, that's minimal. You cannot just bake a little bit of bread or a little bit of cake. By the way, taking off challah applies to cake as well. It doesn't have to be bread that's just on water and grain, on water and flour. Even if it's sweet, like it's a type of cake, that's fine. It's any kind of mizonot, the dough would need challah separated from. Although there are some opinions that in certain cases it's separate without a brocha, I'm not going to go into the details right now. But generally speaking, the pata babi kisnin, what's called the bread that's sweet and which blessing is mizonot, not hamotzi lechem minaris, still it requires separating challah if it's baked as regular bread in the stove. But the question is, what's the minimal amount? Usually when women bake a little bit of cake, that's never even near the amount of flour you need to be able to separate challah. Challah is separated only from Omer. The minimal amount that's mentioned, whatever the Jews ate in the desert, that's the amount of flour, of dough, that is needed in order to separate challah. Now, we are not sure 100% how much was the size of an egg, what was the volume of an egg in those times. So that's why they're usually, in Sidurim and in halachic works, there are usually two volumes given. the minimal volume from which we separate challah without a blessing, and the volume from which you could for sure make a brocha as well. You could make a blessing when separating challah. Just like always, whenever there is an uncertainty, a safek, we separate without a brocha. We do not make a blessing on those mitzvot where we're not sure we have to keep that mitzvah. So if the amount of flour is somewhere in between the minimal and the maximal amount of what Omer was, we separate the challah and we do not say the bracha. But what those two volumes are, there are all kinds of opinions. Now notice, it goes by volume, not by weight, but it's a lot easier usually to find out what the weight of some flour is than to find out how much volume is going to make when you make a dough. Volume is a lot harder to measure, so that's why they usually give in grams and kilograms or pounds, even though this is not exact, but it gives you a general idea. Most of the flour is more or less, the density of it is more or less known, so we could more or less figure out if this much flour is used, most likely the dough will have the right volume. So some of the numbers given are a kilogram and 200 grams as the minimal, and I think some Sephardim separate the challah already with a brocha when it's a kilogram and 666 grams. So this is more than 3 pounds of flour. It's closer to 4 pounds of flour, and others separate only from 5 or 6 pounds of flour or a little bit more. So there are different opinions exactly what the volume is from which you could separate for sure with a blessing. But it comes, like I said, from this Omer that's mentioned in our weekly Parsha, the 10th of an Eifa, which, as I said, is approximately, if you take a volume of an average egg, not large eggs and not small eggs, but average eggs, whatever those are. So if you take 43 and 1/5 of those eggs, the Talmud tells us that's the amount from which challah is separated. By the way, the word challah, interestingly, also has that Gematria. It's 43. And 1/5 could be hinted by the last letter of the word challah, hey, 5. So it's just an interesting coincidence, or maybe it's Min Hashamayim that the word challah kind of hints to the amount of flour from which you separate challah. So if a person makes a little bit of cake or bread, then for sure no challah has to be separated. And on this I'm going to end. In our day, by the way, the custom is that we burn our challah, we don't give it to Kohanim. There are a whole bunch of reasons for it. There used to be until recently, at least outside the land of Israel, that sometimes Kohanim were able to eat challah, as of course the Torah prescribes, but outside the land of Israel, there are certain leniencies that even though our Kohanim, and all of us, not just Kohanim, are ritually unclean, in certain cases the challah could be eaten. In the land of Israel, for sure, the Kohen cannot eat challah today or truma because we're all ritually unclean. But outside the land of Israel, there are certain leniencies on that. But still, just on practical level, very few people need today a little bit of our challah, a little bit of our dough. So in most cases, the Kohen isn't interested either, so we just separate a little bit of the dough and then burn it. But it cannot be eaten by a regular person, only by Kohanim, and only under certain ritual purity restrictions. And on this I'm going to end. If you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.